Welcome, friends, to Breakfast in the Ruins, a Michael Moorcock flavoured podcast. On this show, we're having a bit of a diversion. I mean, that's not unusual for this show, we rarely stay on track for long, but here's some context. For a while now, I've been thinking about tackling Mike's venture into writing commissioned fiction for an established IP, and of course I am talking about his Doctor Who novel, The Coming of the Terraphiles. A while back I was having a talk with Miles about it, and, having touched upon the IP adventures of E.C. Tubb and Michael Butterworth with their Space 1999 novels in episode past, and Robert Sheckley a couple of shows ago when Derek and I talked about options, it struck me that Miles and I have talked very briefly about one of these Sheckley novels a couple of years ago with his 1995 Aliens novel, Alien Harvest. As it happens, that was a novelisation of the 1992 Dark Horse comic Aliens Harvest, so it wasn't an original story set within an IP. But during a few dull months in 2022, I did read some that are. On one particularly bored day, after slogging through the massive 1,000 plus page Aliens The Original Years Volume 1 comic omnibus, and after reading Pat Cadigan's novelisation of William Gibson's Alien 3, I fancied myself a bit more alien action, and found that Titan had been publishing original stories set within that IP, so I picked up a 7-book collection for a bargain price. And, to be honest, they were mostly awful, but one was really, really good, and we'll touch on that. But this really, really good one, and its sequel, prompted me to buy more, and it wasn't long before my enthusiasm came back to bite me. And that brings us to Alien Colony War. I was desperate to talk to someone about this book, and about novels written for established IPs and the grinding production train of this type of merch, so I sent Miles a copy, but I also sent him a copy of the really, really good one too, to satisfy the cosmic balance. Then I found out our old mucker Ian Stead AKA Biomassart had Colony War as well, so we roped him in, and here we are. We will get to the coming of the Terraphiles at some point, but for now, we're going to continue our occasional gassing about novels set within established IPs as a way of preparing the way. And the IP in this case is the Alien universe. So lay back in your cryopod and drift into a deep hypersleep that, hopefully, won't end with some kind of horrific parasite humping your beautiful face and laying its terrifying progeny in your gizzards. And come with us as we have a couple of liveners and talk about some genuinely baffling choices. And some really, really good ones, as we look at Alien Colony War. We're back in Derry and Tom's, and we have a particularly special Derry and Tom's going on today for a couple of reasons. One is this could be the launch of some kind of weird new angle on this podcast. We've had one shit books, we've had one Old Pier bookshop special. We might have other things because, funnily enough, I was talking to Tash the other day, and she may be making a return to Derry and Tom's, but only under certain circumstances where I had to roll over and say, all right. So, yeah, Tash may be back, and that will be called Tash's Choice. But on this occasion, well, before we get into it, first of all, welcome back, Miles. Miles, what have you been up to?
Oh, not much. Just watching far too much Star Trek and reading wonderful books with which I get sent from you, Andy.
Yeah, there's probably an apology coming at some point along the line here, but we'll get to that. So what have you been talking about on Casual Trek?
Oh, the last episode we recorded for scheduling, we briefly talked about the Doctor Who specials and briefly on my current quest to rewatch all of Classic Who in broadcast order because I've always said I've wanted to, but I've never actually gone around to it, and it's really made me love William Hartnell as the Doctor because I get to see the actor grow into and how the character changes instead of just watching one story one Hartnell story when I feel like it.
Yeah, he definitely has a sort of arc, doesn't he, as that series goes on? Not just because they're really kind of trying to figure out what a Time Lord is, and it's very early days. But even him, you can tell that just in terms of the role, he's doing different things with it as time progresses.
Because he starts off almost like, like the anti-villain of the show, and then by the time I've kind of gotten, he's the Doctor. He's got all the mannerisms. He's become the cuddly grandfather we all kind of just see the first Doctor as.
So are you doing this because you needed a break from Trek?
No, I did it because I was watching Ahsoka, the Star Wars show. I was like,
Ah.
this is really boring. I'm gonna watch.
Yeah.
This is really kind of dull and bland. So I'm gonna watch my first and favorite classic Who serial, which was John Pertwee, Planet of the Daleks, which is not a great Doctor Who story by any stretch of the imagination. But I had so much fun. I was like, God, I love this. I'm just gonna do this now, and just went in on it.
Yeah, because of course Planet of the Daleks spins off from
Frontier in
Space? Yeah, and that's a 6-episode story as well, isn't it? So it's two 6-episode stories back to back, both of which prove less is more, and that the 6-episode habit that they used to have, it really wasn't necessarily a bad thing when they tended to just do 4-episode stories.
Yeah, it's Jon Pertwee, walking around in fantastic velvet suits, just clearly knowing that he owns the place, and I'm never dull or bored watching Pertwee do his shtick.
Yeah. I mean, Tom Baker's my Doctor, but I think probably the one that I prefer to watch because it has that Quatermassy angle early on. With UNIT and with old power stations and all that stuff. Yeah, I probably prefer to watch early Jon Pertwee to anything else.
Pertwee is like my comfort food Doctor.
Yeah.
I can always put on a Pertwee. I'm just gonna feel nice inside.
Yeah, that is a good way of putting it, actually, because you know what? I like me a Snickers, and I like all sorts of other things, but if you actually just produce a lovely tray of wonderful variety of Turkish delight, then that's my Jon Pertwee of confectionery. Yeah. And of course, we also have today first-time arrival in Derry and Tom's, but long-time friend of the show, and of course, friend of the drinking variety from our trips to Moorcock too. We've got Ian Stead, AKA Biomassart. So, welcome, Ian.
Hello.
Well, you know the drill, Ian. You know the drill. We've got to ask, because you're a first-time guest, what is your history with Moorcock and, of course, genre fiction?
I'm going to blame my uncle. My uncle used to work at a tip, refuse site. And one day I was at my nan's house, and he handed me this little box set for the history of the rune staff. It's the Grafton ones.
Ah, the slipcase
that he found. He said, "Oh, do you want them?" And that's where it started.
Fantastic.
Essentially.
Yeah, but you're also a big sci-fi guy as well, aren't you? Yeah, because actually you're not only a big sci-fi guy, but one of your pursuits is you actually do layouts and things for sci-fi RPGs and deck plans and various other bits and pieces. Yeah. So what role-playing games have you worked on?
Mindjammer, Traveller, Hostile.
Mm-hmm.
There are 3 I can think of. Yeah, essentially.
Yeah, so and actually, proper, genuine Mark Miller Traveller as well.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting that you're here, actually, because it was kind of a strange piece of synchronicity that we ended up deciding that this would be a 3-hander, because this podcast particularly has come around in a round-the-house kind of fashion, because we're kicking off what, as I said, might be a series of episodes talking about spin-off novels from established IPs. Now, that does sound quite weird and specific, but it's because Miles and I were considering what we could cover, because I felt I owed it to Miles to maybe cover something good this time after subjecting him to gore last time around. So
we did do Domain, and Domain was a lot of fun.
We did do Domain, and even on this occasion, actually, my urge to give you something good to cover might not have quite paid off. But, anyway, unlucky Miles. But previously, anyway, we've touched upon when other established SF authors we've talked about on the podcast have done the same thing. So, for example, when we talked about Doom Arrest, E.C. Tubb wrote Space 1999 novels. Michael Butterworth of Time of the Hawklords wrote Space 1999 novels. In Butterworth's case, I think they were strictly novelisations, whereas E.C. Tubb actually did original stories set within the IP. And of course, most recently, we talked about Robert Sheckley and Options, writing Deep Space Nine, Babylon 5 and Alien spin-offs. although the Alien spin-off, which I think I did recommend to you at one point, Miles, was actually a novelisation of a Dark Horse comic.
Yeah,
so it
Alien
wasn't his
was that.
own.
That was Alien Harvest, right?
Yeah, is it? Yeah, Dark Harvest, something Harvest.
Yeah.
I can't remember. I think the name of the novel is slightly different to the name of the comic. But anyway, it wasn't an original Robert Sheckley story. It was a novelisation of a Dark Horse comic. Anyway, it's Alien spin-offs we're actually going to kick this series off with, because quite some time back, I tipped Miles off to one that I'd read that I had some thoughts about. And I thought, who would I like to talk about this book with the most? So I sent you a copy, didn't I, Miles?
I'm trying my best not to feel insulted right now.
Yeah. So I think this is probably my third apology. I'll stop apologising at some point, I'm sure. But as it happens, I was talking to Ian a few days ago, and he just happened to mention that he was checking out some Aliens novels from this more recent Titan line. Can't quite remember how this conversation came about, Ian. How did we end up talking about Aliens novels?
I have no idea. I think I just...
Yeah, we're all getting to that age
You'd
now. We can't
mentioned
actually remember
ages
these
ago
things.
that you had was it Cold Harvest?
I think I've mentioned the
and you
Cold
mentioned
Forge to you.
Picked up Colony War and said how you loved it.
Yeah.
And I think I just picked up an Audible thing for a month. And I thought, a lot of the Alien Audibles are free. You're part of your Audible scheme, as it were. And Colony War happened to be one of them. And I said, fancy trying that, because I was going through the Horus Heresy, Siege of Terror. So one book a month, followed by an Alien book, because it's free.
Oh my god! Well, that's another massive series of IP novels.
Fortunately, it's just ended.
Oh, blimey! I actually started
Final
on
book
the
is
Horus.
3 parts: the end and the death.
For God's sake!
Apparently, it's worth it.
Yeah, I started on the Horus Heresy novels when they first came out, 10 years ago, whatever it was, because I'd read the Gaunt's Ghosts novels and I really liked them. So I tend to like Dan Abnett.
Yeah.
And I think the Caiaphas Cain novels, I'd read a couple of those as well, and they were all right. They were a bit more like Flashman in space, so that they had quite an interesting take on the Imperial Guard. And the main character was a abject coward, which I thought was quite amusing for a Warhammer 40,000 setting. But bloody hell, those Horus Heresy novels, if it wasn't a Dan Abnett novel, it was 50-50 whether I'd even finish them. I think there was a couple I didn't mind. There was an Aaron Dembski-Bowden one, the first one that he wrote, which I think was Fulgrim. I thought was pretty good, but they're hard work. I think I gave up about after 12 or 13, but bloody hell, it's easy to get sucked down a rabbit hole with those, isn't it?
Well, it's over now.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's probably a good thing, because now you can get into the Titan Alien book line and get swallowed up by that instead. But you listened to the audio version of Colony War,
and I looked at the book as well.
Yeah. So it'd be really interesting to find out just how some of this stuff from you, how some of this stuff was handled in terms of audio, because how on earth, I think you would have to be an American narrator to not just scoff and snort constantly when you're reading some of the lines in that book. But before we get to that, Miles, what was your first introduction back in the day to the IP spin-off novel?
Oh, you see, it would probably have been Star Wars, because I came to Star Wars and Doctor Who about the same time, and of course this would be when Virgin were doing the Doctor Who New Adventures, which were very much outside I would have been like 10 or 11, and the New Adventures novels were very much written for people in like late teens, early 20s, so they're a lot more adult, a lot edgier. I mean, honestly, for a lot of these books. And so the Star Wars novels, like the Heir to the Empire post-Jedi, probably took up a very large amount of my teenage reading.
What about you, Ian?
Yeah, I went through the extended universe for Star Wars with Heir to the Empire and some other bits and bobs. Similar thing to Miles.
Yeah, I think Splinter of the Mind's Eye, I've never read any of those, but Splinter of the Mind's Eye is probably the first ever IP spin-off novel I ever read.
Yes,
which of course was the original Star Wars sequel pre-Empire Strikes Back, wasn't it?
That's right.
Yeah, I remember it's being a fun one with written by Alan Dean Foster, and hilarious in hindsight, because Luke spends a lot of time in that book very clearly lusting after Leia, which becomes funnier after the reveal that they're actually brother and sister in Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, it's another great example of how that was just pulled out of his arse.
Yeah,
for Return of the Jedi. You know, the idea that he had this enormous arc in mind all the fucking time. Some of the absolute bullshit that's flown around since the sequel said, "Oh yeah, well, he always intended to do these 6 films, but he didn't have the technology to do the first 3, so he decided to all bullshit."
No.
All absolute bullshit. Made up on the fucking fly. Yeah, because he needed a twist. He liked the father twist in Empire Strikes Back. He thought, how can we match the father twist? Let's go with the sister thing. Yeah. Actually, Splinter of the Mind's Eye, I think I've also read that Splinter of the Mind's Eye, which, funnily enough, Alan Dean Foster also novelised the Alien novels, so a little connection there. But Alan Dean Foster, he wrote that as a potential sequel to Empire Strikes Back if they didn't get as much money. And they didn't have as big a budget, which is why they didn't have Han Solo or Chewbacca in it or anything else, and it was a smaller cast of characters. That might also be complete horseshit. I have absolutely no idea. But other ones I read as well. I read E.T. years before I ever saw the film. Okay, that's a novelisation. But Quatermass novels by Nigel Neal, read them way before I ever saw any of the TV shows. More on that soon, because we'll be talking about Quatermass in a couple of episodes' time. But in terms of IP spin-offs, Vonda N. McIntyre wrote Star Trek novels that were original stories, so not like the James Blish novelisations, the James Blish logs. And they were really good. I read those at school. And the Flash Gordon movie had spin-off novels, weirdly. I'm not sure how many people are actually aware of that, but I think 3 Flash Gordon spin-off novels that were all set after the movie. And there were the Han Solo novels of Brian Daley. So Han Solo at Star's End, Han Solo and the Lost Legacy. Long, long time since I read them. Can't remember anything about them. And it was only years later when they did the Solo movie that I realised there were actually Lando Calrissian novels as well. Completely missed them.
Those are crazy.
I quite fancy getting my hand on them, but they're quite hard to find. But these are different, really, to the Alien spin-offs for I suppose, for reasons. Or certainly the Titan Alien novels, because those properties generally involve like episodic stories about established characters in that wider setting. Whereas the interesting thing about these novels, I suppose, just historically, we should say that there were shitloads of Alien novels, but they were all novelisations of Dark Horse comics, for the most part. But Titan, about I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, maybe 7 years ago, started doing Alien novels and Predator novels that were all original stories set within those established IPs, some of them crossovers as well. And I can't remember if I read the novelisation of the first Dark Horse comic, or whether I just read the comics. That had Hicks and Newt in it in the first original version of the comic, and The Return of Ripley, but then Alien 3 came out and dumped on it all and kind of ruined the continuity in the canon. So I can't remember if it was the novel or a reprint of the comic where Newt is renamed as a different character. Newt and Hicks are renamed as different characters who are just reskinned versions of Hicks and Newt.
I think it's both.
Yeah.
Because I've definitely read a reprint of the comic, which has the names changed, and the names... So I read the originil trilogy of novels when they got reprinted recently, and it's Wilkes and...
Yes.
Wilkes and Billy. There we go.
Wilkes and Billy. Yeah. Yeah. I'm not sure I ever actually read those. I think I might have only read the originals. And the ridiculous thing is, and I've got a terrible memory, but I got all the Marvel omnibuses of the Dark Horse stories collected. So last year I actually read that first Aliens comic story. And I couldn't tell you if the Marvel reprints actually reprint them with the Hicks and Newt characters or the Wilkes and Billy characters, because my memory's terrible and none of it sunk in. The only thing that really sunk in from reading all that was how good the Dennis Beauvais artwork is on... The fully painted Dennis Beauvais artwork is on that second series, the first half of it. And then the second half switches to a different artist who... fine for the right style of stuff, but compared to the Dennis Beauvais full painted artwork, is absolutely fucking terrible by comparison. And weirdly, I don't know if you checked out Dennis Beauvais recently, but he makes shitloads of money now doing Trump MAGA paintings and portraits of Trump with Jesus behind him, and eagles. Yeah, look it up. Look up Dennis Bover's website. I was really fucking surprised to see it.
Don't make me.
Yeah, it's a bit of a shock.
I live in America. I see that too much to begin with.
So these Titan Alien novels, I think I got 7 in a set, maybe 2 or 3 years ago. I can't remember, it was during the pandemic, and I worked my way through them all, and they are mid to poor for the most part until I came to the Cold Forge, which we're not going to talk about in detail, but we are going to touch upon later as a counterpoint to the book we are going to talk about, because the Cold Forge is excellent. But we are going to talk about it a little bit. But first of all, let's just have a think about what the key... So we've got the Alien IP, we've got the Alien universe, the franchise. What are the key USPs of the Alien franchise, and how in some ways do they become the problems with the Alien in-universe IP? So, who's first? What are the key USPs of the Alien franchise?
Space Marines. For better or worse, it's United States Marine Corps in space.
Yeah. So, Ian? Why are the US Colonial Marines so popular? Because we see it in nerd culture, in nerd circles, in RPG circles, in gaming circles. Everybody fucking loves the US Colonial Marines. Why?
Guns, gear, bravado. It's tech, isn't it? It's the whole thing when Aliens came out. It's very much 80s, 90s. Was it 80s? Thing of action, heroes, big guns, like Starship Troopers. Let's blow the crap out of anything that moves. People love it.
And that's one of the cons as well, isn't it? For me, certainly. I understand why people get really hot on all the technology, because, let's face it, when it comes to Alien and everything else, that Ron Cobb futurism that's influenced everything to do with all this stuff through Blade Runner, through Alien, it's fucking great, isn't it? If you're a sci-fi nerd, you've just got to love that stuff. You've got to love it. But I would say United States Colonial Marine Corps is a major con, not a pro, when it comes to the Aliens IP, because they're all fucking idiots. In the film, they're all idiots and they're shit at the jobs.
Yeah, but definitely in the film, you've got all these really great actors who are definitely bumping up what could just be very banal bit parts with just that little spark of fire. Like, you got Bill Paxton playing Hudson and Michael Biehn playing Hicks, and you've got good actors who make you go, oh man, United States Marine Corps, United Colonial Marines, these guys are badass, and then the film just melts them.
Yeah. For me, the only reason they're popular is the charisma. Take Bill Paxton out of that film. Now, don't get me wrong, I like Michael Biehn. He's made a really good career out of playing soldier types. He's good in The Terminator. He's good as Hicks. He's really good in things like The Rock, in that small part he has in The Rock. He's fucking fantastic in The Abyss. Not the best film, but his part in The Abyss, I think, is absolutely terrific. But I think it's almost 90% the charisma of Bill Paxton that sells the Colonial Marines and helps you forget or overlook the fact that they're fucking useless. They're plainly terrible. They're gung-ho yahoos. And when you watch it with a more analytical eye, they blame Gorman for everything, not their own lack of discipline for how useless they are. When everything's going to shit, you've got Gorman in the APC. He's visibly sweating, he's nervous, but he gives this instruction: lay down suppressing fire with incinerators and fall back by squads. Now that, to me, seems like quite a reasonable instruction. Ipone, the experienced sergeant, is standing there doing fuck all, holding onto his earpiece, going, say again, all aft incinerators, like a fucking idiot. He's not taking charge of the situation. They're all running around panicking like dweebs. Would any additional discipline have made any difference? Maybe not, but at least they wouldn't look like massive fucking idiots, particularly given the build-up and all the cockiness and bravado that they show. And I know it's supposed to be like a Vietnam allegory and everything else. If you follow that through to its natural conclusion, it means that they're all basically conscripts, and they're not professional soldiers at all. They're just fucking stoners who managed to get conscripted somehow. Yeah. So I think that works in the context of the movie. I like to think of the Colonial Marines that way, as just a bunch of drunk yahoos. I think that's fine. But the novels and the comics consistently portray them as this badass, professional, hardcore military force. And for me, I'm afraid it just doesn't work. It just doesn't work in the slightest. I mean, I like the hardware, I like the trappings. I think the other thing that bothers me about it is in Alien, you had this like corporate future which conjured up the idea of like a nationless future where corporations control everything, and then James Cameron couldn't resist slapping stars and stripes on everything, and that and the rank idiocy made it really, really hard for me to root for them. Which, incidentally, is why in the sequel to The Cold Forge, which is maybe the 9th or 10th novel in this sequence, Into Charybdis, it's the only one that makes them interesting. We'll probably touch on that later on, but it makes the Colonial Marines really interesting for a good reason. Right, so that's Colonial Marines. What else? What else are the unique USPs of the Alien IP? Maybe not unique, but what are the things that we've got to have in the novels?
Xenomorphs.
Yeah, so the
On the
aliens.
conspiracy.
Yeah, you've got. Let's tackle the aliens first. So the big USP is, of course, the aliens or the xenomorphs, thanks to the Aliens movie, which again the Cold Forge comes up with quite an amusing way of dismantling the xenomorph tag, which I thought was quite funny. But the alien in Alien, ancient, unknowable, horrifying life cycle, stunning visual design. Geiger's alien is inscrutable, it's sly, it's slow, it's methodical, it's deliberate in its behaviour, yet still terrifying and effortlessly violent. In Aliens, they're just a big insect hive, and they shriek and run into guns and get blown to bits. Terrible. Which form of the alien do books tend to follow up on?
En masse video game baddies.
And I find that
bugs
slightly disappointing.
The big horror bad.
Yeah, they do. They turn them into bugs. They refer to it being a bug hunt, and that's all language from Starship Troopers.
Yes.
Because James Cameron wanted to make Starship Troopers, and he saw doing a sequel to Alien. Oh god, this is turning into a I must knock aliens movie, Screed, which I didn't intend it to be, but I can't help myself. So yeah, the aliens, they're really interesting. The most interesting movie monster villain ever created. So yeah, you've got to have them. You said conspiracy as well, Ian. So you've got to have the corporate conspiracy stuff, haven't you? So what do you get in the books? What would you want from a spin-off when you've got this kind of corporate future to play with? Universe-wide, inhabited space, corporate culture, what could you do with that?
It would probably be like, inter corporate, like corporate infight, corporate versus corporate, of them trying to get the upper hand. It's basic Cold War mentality of an arms race with the xenomorphs. So only neither sides will win because you can't control them.
There's some quite interesting potential stories there, isn't there? The books, it's always Weyland-Yutani. It's always Weyland-Yutani, and it's boring. I don't know whether this is something which is impressed upon them by the IP owners or whatever, but you get the sense in Alien that the company is the power in this future setting. So I'd like it to be a bit more like the Traveller 2300 setting, which is, to be honest, heavily influenced by Alien and Aliens, where you have nations, corporations, nation-states, all out in the stars, all competing with each other. You get a little bit of that in some of the expanded fiction. The Alien 3 William Gibson script, which was adapted as a novel by Pat Cadigan, and also done as a graphic novel, that introduces the Union of Progressive Peoples as like an alternative Cold War sort of COD communist space state. But, okay, fair enough. So you get those two dual tracks where I think you get a Weyland-Yutani station or a United Core Systems station or a United America system and the Union of Progressive Peoples, and you get a two-track story. That's quite interesting. Does something different, but the books, the IPs, it always tends to be Weyland-Yutani, and that is a little bit dull. So, what can you bring in that's fresh and original? I don't know, clumsy political allegory? Well, we'll get to that in a minute, won't we?
See, out of the recent Aliens novels which I've read, the ones I've enjoyed the most have been the ones which don't do any of that, which I think there's Phalanx by Scott Siegler, which takes place on I think it's like a colony world which has regressed to medieval era level technology. So you have people who have stone castles and bows and arrows.
Yes.
Versus aliens. And the other one was Echo by Mira Grant, which is a YA novel which takes place on a colony planet, but your main characters are high school kids trying to survive an alien infestation on their home planet. While also dealing with all the kind of high school... Well, there's teen drama and stuff going on, but it's like they're on the outskirts of an alien novel happening just over the corner, and they're trying to get off the planet while they're being picked off one by aliens.
Weirdly, I was only reading not so long ago about what Alien Romulus, the Fede Alvarez film, is supposed to be about. And that sounds quite similar, because I'm pretty sure that's mostly teenagers. So, yeah, maybe they've taken a tip from that. You also actually recommended Phalanx to me quite a while back, and I've had it in my shopping basket for absolutely ages, and I think I am going to pull the trigger on it and give it a look. Yeah.
See, when it comes to like Alien Free, or rather planned versions of Alien Free, I always remember the idea that for Alien Free, they went for penal colony, but originally it was going to be a monastery.
Yeah,
and that just kind of sounds much more interesting, because it gets to, you do something different instead of just having it be like corporate intrigue, corporate backstabbing. Instead, turning it to the parts I really like about Alien and Alien Free, where they're survival horror movies.
Yeah. If you have access, anybody who's listening, if you have access to the Alien, I think it used to be referred to as the Alien Quadrilogy, but anyway, the Alien box set of Blu-rays or DVDs, the documentary, the 3-hour-long documentary on the making of Alien 3, has got about 45 minutes on Vincent Ward's Alien 3, which was the wooden planet, the monastery, no guns, all of the things that ended up forming the core of what Alien 3 became, because actually they just ended up becoming like a religious sect of prisoners instead of an actual monastery who behave in some ways monk-like. But a lot of the core characters are intact from that. There's not only interviews with Vincent Ward and really fantastic background information on what that script was been like, and it was actually in pre-production until David Gower and Walter Hill suddenly got cold feet and thought, oh no, this might not work, and just basically pulled the plug on it, and then got fucking Rennie Harlin to come in and rework it, of all people. But that's absolutely fascinating, and actually I probably would, even though, on some level I don't mind Prometheus as a sci-fi film, and on some level I don't mind Alien Covenant as a sci-fi film, I think they're awful Alien universe films. I moan about what Aliens did to the aliens, but it's still not as bad as what Prometheus did to the space jockey. Jesus Christ, that's one of the worst things in sci-fi cinema ever. But
I've made my peace with them.
Well, yeah, I can, as I said, I can watch them as interesting sci-fi films. What I can't do when I go back and watch Alien and they're looking at the fossilised remains of the space jockey, what I can't accept is that there's just a giant 7-foot-tall bald bloke inside it. That just doesn't work for me at all, I'm afraid. But as a standalone thing, sort of Alien adjacent, I can just about cope with him. But yeah, anyway, where were we? We've got to build up to some point about talking about this fucking book, haven't we?
Or avoid talking about the fucking book.
You made me read it.
well, that's fair, actually.
Or listen to it.
We did bully you into this. Well, bully you both into it, in a way.
I had a week to do it.
Well, yeah, but you only had to listen while you were jogging. You could do other things. You could do other things at the same time. So the novels, for the most part, stick strictly with the mindless alien bug hordes that run that I honestly hold a deleted scene in the Alien Special Edition responsible for almost all of this. And that's the sentry gun scene in the Aliens Special Edition, which, okay, I'm going to dump on Aliens again, but only that special edition. Actually, no, there are other special edition scenes I don't like either. But it's one of the best examples of why pulling most of those scenes made the theatrical cut so much better. Not just in terms of pacing, but it turned the aliens into just being just as thick and useless as the Marines. So instead of having these super sly, super slick, super deliberate, unknowably obscure in their thinking, they just run into sentry guns like fucking idiots, but everybody loves it because cool sentry guns. The other example of why pulling those scenes, I think, is the Hadley's Hope scene at the beginning. I think is pretty terrible. Dispels a lot of the mystery in the theatrical version. And the scene at the derelict with Newt's parents, where they go into the derelict, and there's a massive tube of what looks like silver washing machine tubing that comes out the back of a washing machine dangling down from a ceiling. It's fucking terrible. But anyway, so yeah, you always get those. And the aliens becoming shrieking rage machines is really disappointing for me. But, okay. William Gibson's Alien 3 script tries to do something different with it, I suppose, but it still has shrieking rage machines.
Can I quickly bring up a deleted scene in Alien that I really like? And that's the scene, I think it's in the novelization as well, when Ripley finds the captain in the ship and he's being turned into an egg. I'm just like, I just wish they'd kept that in, because that's far more creepier than, oh yes, there's actually a special queen alien which just lays his eggs out of a giant inseminoid tube.
Yeah. Oh, don't get me started on Inseminoid. It's one of my favourite films from the 80s. I still have, on a shelf behind me, I've got the original ex-certificate pre-video recording act copy of Inseminoid on VHS. Yes!
You've got a video nasty.
I do have a video nasty. I've also got the original, I think I might have I said this already on it? I think I might have said this to Derek last time out. But yeah, I've got the original Brimstone and Treacle ex-certificate video as well, pre-video recording act. Yeah. But yeah, that deleted scene in Alien is actually in Ridley Scott's director's cut. So if you watch Ridley Scott's director's cut, it's got that. It's weirdly it's shorter than the running length because he actually trimmed some scenes down. And there is one thing in it that I really don't like that he changed. But that scene is absolutely terrific because not only have you got Dallas cocooned into the wall, you've got Brett also cocooned into the wall, but sort of melting into a proto-egg. And that alien life cycle is what is so fucking brilliant about it. Yeah, you're absolutely right. Turning it into an insect hive is bollocks. It's really disappointing. But, the Alien 3 script, funnily enough, the William Gibson script, just as people kind of getting infected, sort of, by the DNA, and just sort of aliens just erupt out of their skin. Which, funnily enough, ends up happening in Alien Covenant. Weirdly. Yeah. So it does undermine the point of the egg, face hugger, rape, chest birth angle. But, at least it tried to do something different, I suppose. And I did like some of the world building, like the Union of Progressive People. That was pretty good. But, it does bring us back to the nature of the problem with IP novels and the fixed nature of what can be done. And I suppose it's inevitable because the films most embedded in the SF fan community that are most likely to buy merch and spin-offs is maybe the massive love that the people have for aliens. And that's fair. That's fair. You can't really argue with that, can you? Companies want to make money. And of course, we've commented on one of the other USPs, which is that Ron Cobb futurism, just the look of it, the look of the technology. And I don't think Ron Cobb worked on Aliens, but the Sulaco is a perfect extrapolation of that. Did Ron Cobb do the design for Aliens?
He did. I think he designed the colony.
Right.
Sid Mead, I believe, designed the warship.
Well, yeah, Sid Mead, another absolute genius, isn't he?
James Cameron had a hand in the design as well, because I think he designed the drop ships.
Yeah.
So it was I know the original design for the Sulaco was a big ball thing that's now in the role-playing game. If you ever look at it. If you've seen the Colonial Marines book?
I have, but
the big round...
I only read about 20 pages and put it on the shelf.
It's the big round OPA warship is actually the concept design for the Sulaco.
Right. Okay.
Happens a lot, especially in Star Wars. Let's steal the concept design and stick it into what we're doing now.
Well, yeah, fair enough. It's a great design. Why not? Yeah. So, you've got the alien life cycle. I think Aliens kind of fucked that up a little bit because, if you're thinking about what to do with this and you take Aliens out of the equation and you're just going to extrapolate something that you saw in Alien, you could think about, right, what are the conditions that cause the alien to develop in the way that it does? Do the conditions in which the alien hatches have a significant impact on its physicality? There's that great bit in the shuttle in Alien where Ripley can't distinguish it from the machinery around it. That's right. It's fantastic. It grows, but does it eat? What does it do? Does it absorb material from the environment? Does its biomechanoid appearance, is it because it's got some kind of natural ability, like a chameleon, like a chameleon lizard, to blend in with its surroundings? So none of that has ever been exploited or looked at. And even more irritatingly, they tried a little bit of this variance, and this was actually expanded upon a lot in the comics, with Alien 3, and depending on which version you watch, the alien coming from the dog or the bull, giving it the dog leg knee arrangement that it has, and a different gait and behaviour. So there's a really terrific bit where one of the prisoners comes around a corner, and it's like worrying at the body of one of the prisoners on the floor, like almost toying with it. But the stupid fucking thing is, every Alien film since has adopted the dog leg arrangement for the alien legs, when all of them come from humans. Anyway, we read and listened to Colony
I feel
War.
your rage.
Yeah. We read and listened to Colony War by David Barnett, which was maybe the 8th or 9th book in the ongoing Titan series. And I think it's fair to say this book hurt. I don't know if you would agree with me, gentlemen.
Can I point out a little detail?
Yes.
Is this book, I got mine from Oxfam, and it was pristine.
Yeah.
Which for £2.69, which is a clue.
Fuck you, Ian Stead. I paid 10 quid for mine. I think I paid $15 for yours, Miles.
I was just looking at the copyright at the front.
Oh, yeah.
And it says David Barnett asserts the moral right to be identified as the author of this work. That is a bold claim. That is a bold and brave claim, sir.
Would you buy him a pint?
Depends what the pint was. Well,
you know what? I'm sure he's a lovely guy.
He probably is.
Sure.
I got Into the Fire as well. Is that any good?
You did what?
I got Into the Fire at the same time. That was £2.69. So it's not a bad deal.
Yeah. Well, I mean, David Barnett sounds like a really interesting guy. He's written plenty of books. He's written for The Guardian. And I don't think this book hurt because it was poorly written. It's just choices that are made that cause me to scratch my head with this book and occasionally want to throw it at the wall. But let's get positive. Does it do anything well?
Actually, I think it does. I think you have the synthetic character Davis, who has his personality built into a dog synthetic. And then later on, it reveals that one of the other characters is also a synthetic. And it has a very nice relationship at the end, and just at the end of the book when the two characters sacrifice themselves. Spoiler alert. It theorizes that the reason Davis willingly went to his death was so this synthetic who acted and believed she was a little girl wouldn't have to die alone. And you have the main character Chad thinking, this proves that these machines can evolve to become, something close to human.
Yeah.
And I thought that was actually a genuinely touching moment in this not fantastic book.
Yeah, it was my favorite character. Not the non-human was my favorite character.
Yeah, we failed to mention, didn't we, that when it comes to features of the Alien IP, synthetics are a core part of it. So, of course, we had Ash in the first one, who was villainous. Then we had Bishop, who is everybody's favourite synthetic, because, again, Lance Henriksen, incredible charisma, great performance as Bishop in that film. So we always have the synthetics. And yeah, the synthetics are always interesting characters. When we talk about the Cold Forge later on, about the only sympathetic character in that entire book is Marcus the synthetic. But yeah, so you got Davis, this dog synthetic, who is a recurring character, because there are recurring characters in these novels. And he's been in a previous one, he was a combat synthetic. I think the child being a synthetic, whilst I agree with what you're saying about that actually being a good moment in terms of the book, in terms of character development, the reveal of the child as being a synthetic is the worst fucking most obvious
the reveal is just, it's so, again, it's just, it feels like all the choices in this book, the writer went left to do something safe instead of, taking what could, there are some interesting elements which could have been done with the book and the concepts if they hadn't always gone the predictable, this is what they did in Aliens, so this is how we should do it route.
Well, this is what they did in Aliens is one of the core problems with that final scene. Because in Aliens, the machine turning the atmosphere into a breathable atmosphere is described as basically being a giant thermonuclear reactor. And if it gets pierced, adios muchachos, everything else. So the pulse rounds blow a hole in the shielding. So in this, we've got to have the lead shielding gets compromised and the whole thing's going to go nuclear, right? But he doesn't say thermonuclear reactor because he thinks, right, this is sci-fi, it's a fusion reactor. So a fusion reactor with a lead shield that's going to go nuclear. Really? Really? So the entire sacrifice is to stop a fucking fusion reactor going nuclear. It's like, oh, for Christ's sake. These things must be edited by people who understand science fiction. But, so every time there's something good, there is a downside for me. Yeah. What else does it do well? There must be something.
I think it does try and set up the wider setting more. So it talks about the OPA. It talks about New Albion. It talks about the Three World Empire, the ISSCC. It does a bit more. There are other powers out there. There's not just the Three Worlds power. It does expand the universe more.
Yeah, well, they're all from other books. And none of it is... The only thing that's original in the entire thing is New Albion. And we'll get to that. And the best of British to you when we do.
Chin chin.
Let's start picking through the weeds, shall we?
So
what's the basic setup? So a crew wake from hypersleep on their ship, the Clara, to find that the computer's being shifty and withholding information because, of course, core thing in Alien, shifty computer. But they were carrying ore and some looted cargo they were keeping in cryostasis.
A shifty computer, which those characters have a maternal relationship to. Because, like in the film, the computer's called Mother.
So, again, staples. So they're carrying ore, they've got some looted cargo they've been keeping in cryostasis, 27 strange eggs they're salvaged from a derelict freighter. But they realise they've been boarded while they're in hypersleep and their valuable cargo has been stolen, and then the ship blows up due to charges planted on the hull. Bummer. Okay, but sets a couple of things up. One, people are trafficking in the eggs and engaging in acts of piracy to get them, which is all very Dark Horse comics. There's a reference which starts to come in these books quite a lot in the last few books to rumours of black goo falling from the sky on frontier worlds, which brings the action from Prometheus and Alien Covenant into the universe. It's all the same IP after all. But a bit on the nose, this literally referring to the black goo as black goo. But, whatever. So someone nefarious has 27 eggs that they can now get up to mischief with. So that's all fine. I could go with that. If it is Aliens by the numbers, it's certainly Aliens Expanded Universe by the numbers. Then we get an intro to journalist Cher Hunt. And as is traditional with these novels, which do form a loose series, of which this is, I still can't remember, 8th or 9th, I should have looked up a link. We have links established to the last book, which in this case is the rather good Into Charybdis, itself a follow-up to the Cold Forge. Both the really, really good books I've read, both by Alex White, and we'll touch on the Cold Forge later. So we've got some political stakes established with the ISCS and the United Americas, a state of high tension, more Black Goo references, all fine. And then New Albion. Right, so there's a really terrible habit that sci-fi and speculative fiction has of assuming that any future projection of the UK or Britain in the future is some shit theme park version of the British identity, And this is about as egregious as an example as I've ever come across. And actually, there's quite a lot of these in RPGs, isn't there, Ian? Can you think of any of the really, really terrible examples from RPGs where you get supplements about England?
I believe Twilight and Cyberpunk ones.
First
had
edition
issues.
Twilight 2000 Survivor's Guide to the UK
That's the one.
is one of the most hilariously terrible things I've ever read, because one of the military forces vying for control of England is Man United football hooligans. Yeah, seriously.
What were they not brave enough to use Arsenal?
Oh, I don't know. I'm guessing it was written by Americans. They've probably never heard of Arsenal. You know, Rifts England was pretty bad as well.
Rifts England.
Yeah,
like, doesn't it do the same thing with Shadowrun? That England is all mystical and magical because England.
Yeah. I've never read the Shadowrun one, but the Rifts England has got a version of high tech version of Excalibur in it or something, and some kind of weird King Arthur's round. Oh, it's just awful. It's just really, really bad. So yeah, this New Albion malarkey, it might as well be the opening of Austin Powers, but at least that was an actual parody with a great song and dance number and some Burt Bacharach. But the lazy, terrible references start here as well. And when you were reading it, Ian, you sent me a 2-word message, and it was Ryan Space.
Oh God.
She travels to New Albion on Ryan Space. Oh.
Yeah, you were getting a blow-by-blow account over the week.
I was, and I kept on saying gets worse. And you were like, surely not. Then you'd send me something else, I'd go, yeah, gets worse. And I think eventually you got to one thing, and I was like, yep, there it is.
I had to check the book because I was listening to it going, did this really say that? Oh, it did.
Yeah.
The audio is actually completely unabridged. She's good,
really?
The lady who does it, but it's like...
I'm going to read a little bit. As the passengers were conveyed by escalator down toward immigration, wall-mounted screens sparked to life, each one with an attractive young person in the red, white and blue livery of the Union flag, welcoming them to the colony. Each message finishing off with a resounding, "Best of British." Jesus fucking Christ save me from this, Cher muttered, getting ready to approach the biometric station that would read all the documentation from a thumbprint and retinal scan. "You're American," a voice boomed right in her ear, making her at first jump and then her heart sink. "Oh, Mr. Beerbelly." "Excellent deduction, Dr. Watson," Cher said, sighing. "Barry," Mr. Beerbelly said, holding out a sweating hand. Cher ignored it, turning her face away from his alcoholic breath. "You here for an holiday? Business? Moving here? I reckon we could do with a few more beauties like you to liven the place up." "Give me fucking strength," Cher breathed. It was her turn at the immigration station, and she held her head still while she was scanned, then placed a thumb on the keypad. "You need a guide? Give me a shout," he pressed. "Here, let me ping you my comms details." "No thanks," Cher said curtly as the gateway turned green and the barrier swung back to let her through. "Frigid car," Mr. Beerbelly said behind her as she followed the signs for the baggage reclamation. "You might change your mind once you've been to New Albion, mind. There's nothing like the show on the videos." Oh my God. I thought it's exactly that
Ross
show.
Kemp.
Yeah, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad. And this is the first indication that you get that Mr. Barnett, whilst I'm sure to some degree I share his politics, and I share his disappointment with certain developments in British politics of the last few years, he comes across as having an idea of British identity and constantly sneering at it, which is what makes it even less appealing.
You said he wrote for The Guardian, right?
Yeah.
Well, there we go.
Yeah. He actually reads like a sneering Guardian journalist, a middle-class Guardian journalist. But there is an early example here or two of something minor and trivial, but it reflects the need to incorporate the trappings of the Alien series in these things. Usually it's dropships or ships that look like the Sulaco or pulse rifles. But here we get one of the most stupid examples I've come across. And Cher is thinking, there's this bit she thinks, how annoying the grey pants are. The grey pants and vests they make you wear are when they're going to cryosleep tubes. Right? It's a fairly throwaway little thing. She's really annoyed at the grey pants and vests they make you wear when you're going to cryosleep tubes. Now, why? why might it be the case that they make people wear grey pants and vests when they're going cryotubes? Any ideas? Does that make any sense scientifically or technically? Why might that be the case?
They're almost nude in Alien. So what's
Yeah.
I'd assume
Well, they wear
just,
white
like,
nappies in Alien.
Yeah. I'd assume just like modesty.
There is no rational reason why, other than because in Aliens, when Ripley gets out the cryotube, she's wearing grey knickers and a vest.
Yeah, the Marines are similarly attired, aren't they?
No, the Marines are wearing like olive drab vests and boxer shorts. Ripley gets out in a grey vest and grey knickers. So that translates into this, that in the Alien universe, they make women wear grey vests and knickers. It's fucking stupid. It's just silly. And yeah, why not wear the white nappy John Hurt's wearing in Alien? Because the funny thing about that is, it gives you the sense that maybe they shit themselves in hypersleep or they leak a bit, which actually seems to make some kind of basic level of biological sense. You know, but obviously they've improved technology 57 years later. But yeah, oh God. Another thing that occurs really quickly, planets with a number prefix with the letters LV. Now, this bugged me in Prometheus. It's just the standard now. But it is actually referenced in, I think it might be the Cold Forge or this, I can't remember, that it stands for life viable. That it's in one of the novels. But again, even with this explanation, it's the most awkward planet naming convention ever. So instead of Epsilon Eridani 9, for example, it's LV 743. Even if LV 742 might be 200 light years away. It doesn't make any fucking sense. It's just because they called it LV 421 in Aliens, and when they did Prometheus, they called that LV something, which caused all sorts of discussions. Is it in the same system? But no, they came up with an explanation, which is LV stands for life viable. So it's another example of it's in the movies, but it doesn't make any actual sense as a naming convention.
See, I kind of like it because it kind of indicates that sort of very corporate way of thinking about all these fantastic, these aren't fantastic planets where we can settle and discover new things. They're just like, yep, that's number 5, that's planet 27. That's just go down the list, tick it off, tick it off, tick it off. It's just strips all kind of aesthetic beauty from space exploration.
Yeah, but it's not like the colony, they refer to LV-426 as Acheron or Acheron, don't they? Which I suppose is, it's a bit more romantic. But if you're actually going to give things a chain of numbers and letters, actually make some logical sense, for God's sake. But it's because they came up with it in Aliens, and because there's a slavish adherence to the trappings of the property, they just use it again and again and again and make it an established convention, which is fine. But it's a dumb one, in my opinion. But anyway, back to Colony War, which isn't dumb at all. But the only effective part of this entire allegory is that when she finally arrives, New Albion is a grey shithole. And, that's fair enough, I suppose, because I recall that was my first impression when I first went to London in my teens. So after watching everything on TV about how brilliant London was, I got there. Don't panic, people in London, though, because I don't want to upset people. I know that it previously was upset people from Croydon, Rill, Holderness, and various other places. This is back when my first visit, getting off at King's Cross, was back in the days when it was a very different King's Cross to these days. That area was such a dump in those days, and within 5 minutes of walking out of a platform at King's Cross, you'd either get offered sex or heroin. King's Cross was an absolute shithole 30 years ago. Much nicer now. Although you still got the problem where you get the London version of the black goo, which in London's case is just spend a couple of days riding the tube and your snock turns black. That's London's version of the black goo. It's fucking disgusting. But anyway, story's set up. Cher got a postcard from her sister, a character in the last book. Her sister, Shy Hunt, is a character in Inter Charybdis. And she sent her a postcard cryptically pointing her at New Albion, so she's gone there. Vague mystery for sure, and the stolen eggs that have been established, so aliens will be involved somewhere down the line. Great. The New Albion stuff is irritating so far, but whatever. Let's get into some colony warring. Miles, Ian, are you ready for some colony warring?
Sir, yes, sir.
Well, unlucky, because there isn't much. There is barely any colony warring in this book. It sort of sets up some colony warring.
Yeah,
it's a bit like it's a bit like Madam Web, I understand. Madam Web is about new spider women who don't become spider women in the film. So that feels a lot like colony war. There ain't much colony warring involved. What there is, though, is shitloads of pop culture references and analogies about certain British political developments contemporaneous with the writing of this book, or pop culture references contemporaneous with the upbringing of the writer of this book. And you know what? David Barnett, not only has he written for The Guardian, he's worked for Anti-Beeb, various other outlets, and he is scornful of what is parodying a lot of the personalities involved in it, and I'm right there with him, but for God's sake, how do you guys feel about politics in your sci-fi? Because it's a big issue, isn't it? Lots and lots of people, and we don't want to go down the route of being identified with people who say, this is work because it's got women in it, or this is work because it's got, gay characters in it, or people who aren't white. None of this is any of my criticism of this book, but how do you generally feel about politics in your sci-fi?
Depends what you mean by, do you mean like politics as in like political machinations like, say, Dune or Foundation, or do you just mean like politics like, how these people complain where it says, you have like representation of people who aren't seen as the atypical norm to the reader or writer?
Well, either or, because the interesting thing, you do the Casual Trek podcast, don't you?
Yeah.
And lots of people these days, lots of chodes complain about politics in Star Trek Discovery, for example, for going, keep your politics out of my Star Trek. Whereas 60s Star Trek was constant political allegory and representation, wall to wall, for 3 years. Right?
It's just kind of, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous about what is seen as, this is political these days. When it comes to politics, when it comes to the politics of the book, it's like, I agree, but it's just, there's nothing, you're not giving me anything to really think about. It's just like, hey, let's do Brexit in space. Okay, do something interesting with it.
Got that to come, haven't we? Jesus Christ. Yeah, sorry for taking the J in vain there, but sorry, go on, Ian.
I'd like to say, I think the problem is, it's like I said to you, it's like landmines with him. It's suddenly bang, bang, bang. It's very much, here's a big haddock, I'm going to smack you in the face with it. It's not subtle. If you look at politics over the years, it's always been in sci-fi, one way or the other.
Yeah.
It's more subtle. I mean, if you look at, say, Dune and Star Wars, it borrows it from in the distant past and from now. It does it a lot more subtle.
Yeah.
Like in Star Trek, when XY happened, it was more, he just kissed a lady there, and all right, you just made a reference to the U.S. Terms of the Declaration of Independence. It's more, this is very much in your face.
But is that because we are so far past from, like, from the politics of the 60s, where you'd have things like, when we think about, say, Vietnam, we can only look at it from hindsight because we were born in the time and place we were. Whereas you definitely have literary fiction, like you got your New Wave, which does talk more about the politics and issues of the day instead of just Star Trek, which was a relatively mainstream sci-fi show. It's just that we're reading the politics of something that we've been inundated with, and we're still seeing play out. Like, how many conspiracy films did we get in the 70s post Watergate? But they're not, people aren't saying, like the 3 Days of the Jackal or the Parallax View is woke because it's all inspired by Nixon and Watergate.
Yeah, if this book was doing that, it would have a president in it called Blicchard Bixon. And it would be called fucking Custardgate or something. This is, we haven't even got to it yet, but 3 Wexit. New Albion decides to secede from the Three World Empire, and it's referred to as 3 Wexit. And Prime Minister Maurice Pepper is a shambling figure in an ill-fitting suit with an unruly mop of blonde hair. My God, fuck off.
It can work in 2000 AD. It can't work in your sci-fi, in your alien space horror novel.
No.
That's the problem. The tone is just completely doesn't fit.
Yeah, yeah. I really want to avoid sounding like just whinging nitpickers. And, I do want to separate us from the fucking douchebags who reviewed Inferno's Fall, the novel that succeeds Colony Wars, by a female author, which features a working-class matriarchal society setting, characters of varying colour, gender and sexuality. Well, just look up some of the reviews. You know exactly how it's going to go. But anyway, in this medium and in this setting, with generally hard sci-fi trappings, this for me is kind of headache-inducing. And one in particular is so ridiculously on the nose, it's almost sixth form politics sketch level, even though I entirely identify with the attitude to it. There is a side plot, though, to give us an occasional much-needed break from the Toy Town nonsense of New Albion, where the mines are in the north, referred to as the Shires, and the security forces are called the Duke of Wellington Brigade. And, as we've just alluded to, it does get worse. But over on LV 187, a surviving French colonist and her daughter, a wee lass who seems suspiciously unperturbed by events. Spoiler, we've already spoiled it. She's a synthetic. Although it's plainly fucking obvious from about 2 pages after she's introduced. They're hiding out from terrible creatures that resulted from the discovery of leathery eggs when they see a ship land and think, hooray, we're saved. And at this stage, one may hope for some interesting flavour to differentiate how a French refinery colony might work as opposed to the silliness of New Albion. So how do they establish that this colony or these characters have a French flavour? Can anybody remember? The little girl sings a song.
Oh God, Joe the Taxi.
She sings Joe the Taxi, the Vanessa parody hit from the 1980s. Joe the fucking Taxi. So this middle-class Guardian journalist who wants to establish a French setting as a little girl sing Joe the Taxi. I'm sorry, David. Don't ever listen to this, and if you do, I really apologise. I'm sure you're a lovely fella, and I entirely agree with your politics when it comes to Brexit. Anyway, back on New Albion, new pair of characters introduced. Chad, who's some kind of troubleshooter ex-engineer guy, and his secretly android dog Davis, who we've already referred to, who used to be a combat synthetic. Author throws in a couple of 20th century media references, one blindingly obvious, the other less so, but just in case you miss them, they're explicitly explained directly over the page by Davis, the advanced Weyland-Yutani security AI that's currently an android cockapoo. Davis, as it happens, is one of those recurring Titan Alien novel characters that previously lost his body and is closely linked with 2 other recurring characters. Zula Hendricks, a Colonial Marine, who doesn't actually feature in this book, but she's in lots of the previous ones, and I think might have originated in the comics, but I can't swear to it. And the character of Amanda Ripley from Alien Isolation. So both are briefly referenced here by the first names without explanation, so if you never read those books, you'd be none the wiser. Luckily, the author, though, does explain what Scooby-Doo means, so I suppose that is the most important thing. Now, it's interesting that they introduce a reference to Amanda Ripley, because, of course, Amanda Ripley is the character from the Alien Isolation game. Which, have you both played it?
I have.
Yeah, great game.
I have. I love it, but I think I play it like once for a few days once a year, because I get stuck, because it's really difficult, give up, play it, get 5 minutes further, get stuck, give up.
Yeah, I did exactly the same thing. There's a bit about 3 hours into the game where you come across a section, which is the first time you ever come across a section with lots of working Joes. And I just kept getting beaten to death by one of the working Joes.
Yep.
And it really wound me up. Yeah. But I did go back to it eventually.
It's generally actually scared me.
Oh God, the game is terrifying. I love how the game starts with the 20th Century Fox logo, but it looks like it's being played on a VHS with really bad tracking, and it's been like watched dozens and dozens of times. That was the point. I'm like, okay, this game has me.
Yeah, it's played back like it's through a monitor on the Nostromo, or that level of technology, which is just so fucking delicious.
Don't they?
Yes, yes, they do.
Yeah.
Yeah,
one thing we stole for Hostile.
That's one of the great things about Hostile. It models that form of science fiction beautifully well. Yeah, which is why I like it so much. Now, have you read or listened to the Alien Isolation novelization?
No, I tend to stay away from novelizations of video games.
Yeah,
I
that's
started
the
it,
right
and then
decision.
you interrupted me with this.
Oh, sorry, mate. Well, I was going to say best not to,
Okay.
because only about a third of the book is actually the game. The rest of the book is just expanding stuff from previous novels. So it's not really strictly an adaptation of the game.
It's like the Covenant one. It's like it's the prequel to Covenant. It's actually quite good.
Is that the Alan Dean Foster one?
Yeah.
Because I read the Alien Covenant novelisation.
Right.
Because I was interested to see if it filled in some of the blanks that are missing from the film that you kind of get the sense might have been there originally but got removed for some reason. Sadly, it doesn't. But it's an Alan Dean Foster novel, so it's always a good read anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm definitely tempted to pick up that prequel one just to see what it's all about.
Colin, so do it.
So anyway, Chad and Davis are on New Albion to go to the Shires and check out the wreck of the Clara. So the Clara, the freight from the beginning of the book, crashed on New Albion. They know it was chartered by Weyland-Yutani to get alien eggs from another crashed ship and transport them, but Weyland-Yutani boarded it, or so they think, and blew the Clara up. And then Chad sent Share the postcards to get her to New Albion. So I've got this mystery established, and apart from one thing that they've got slightly wrong, it's an example of two key mysteries have been given away for free, and the only mystery that's left is how much worse can the terrible New Albion, Brexit Britain analogies and pointless 20th century pop culture references get? And the answer is much worse, because they meet Cher in a pub called the Queen's Head, where the barman says, and I quote, "What'll it be for the lady? Half a lager with a dash of lime, G&T, or is it Prosecco o'clock?" Now, at this point, I think it's fair to say that while I was thinking about this episode, I was thinking, what booze do I need to get that's thematically appropriate? So I thought, I've already mentioned this to you, Miles, I thought I need to get something that's like classically British that really kind of matches what this landlord might have in his pub. I didn't have any lager in, and I wasn't going to go to the shop. So I thought, what have I got in the house? I didn't have any John Smiths, thank fuck, because the last time I bought John Smiths, I think I said to Loz, we need to drink Wankers beer because this is a book for wankers. So I got John Smiths, and I only got through half a drink and poured it away. What I did have, I've just had a bottle of Cropton Brewery Yorkshire Pale Ale, which is good because they've just been to the Shires, so that's fine. And I've just cracked into their Yorkshire Stout, their Yorkshire Chocolate Stout. And I've got to say, it's the first Cropton Brewery beers I've ever had. Phil bought me them in a little set, and they're absolutely delicious. Now, I know, Miles, it's still before the yard arm. The sun's not past the yard arm for you, is it?
No, it is 12:30 in the afternoon for me. And my choice of tipple was actually inspired by your the Robert Sheckley episode, where you mentioned where it came up the idea that all states have just like a regional soda.
Yes.
So I googled soda Wisconsin, and I got something called Jolly Good, which I felt was perfect for the cod Englishness of the book.
That is weirdly serendipitous.
It was, and so I picked up a cream. It's a old-fashioned cream soda, which I've been swigging on throughout the recording, and it is actually, in fact, jolly good.
That sounds excellent.
Also, being an Englishman in Wisconsin, I get people shouting "jolly good" at me once a week.
Good lord.
We have to start shouting back at them the best of British. Yeah. What you got, Ian?
Well, I was very unprepared, and I even had a bottle of OP, but I'm in work tomorrow, so I've got to be careful. I've got Vocation chocolate caramel cookie. Stout.
Ooh,
it's very nice.
That sounds
a certain
all right.
Supermarket.
Yeah.
Very nice.
And you do start at Sparrowfart as well, don't you? You have an extraordinarily early work start. What time do you start work in the morning?
Tomorrow's going to be 5. I managed to jiggle it forward 1 hour.
So you've got a late start of 5 a.m.
Yeah.
Holy crap.
This is the advantage of my job is, though, I do get to listen to podcasts a lot.
No, that is the dream.
That is good news.
I actually hide in the chiller. Leave me alone.
Like Morris Pepper hiding in the fridge. Anyway, so Chad recaps the stories of Alien. into Charybdis briefly and tells her about Zula Hendricks and Amanda Ripley, who, despite this being set 3 years after Ripley gets picked up at the beginning of Aliens, is still alive and alien hunting. Therefore, retconning and delegitimizing, really, one of the most honest and heartfelt character beats in the Aliens Special Edition. Just about the only scene in the Aliens Special Edition I actually do like that I would have in the theatrical version is when Ripley is told or finds that her daughter died of old age while she was in hypersleep. I thought that was really effective, and it adds something to Ripley's redemption arc by becoming a surrogate mother figure to Newt. All completely delegitimized and rendered pointless by the Alien Isolation novel and their subsequent use in all of these books. So well done, these books, well done. But not content with all this, the book is still yet truly to jump the shark. But it does so the moment Space Boris Johnson turns up on the telly. He's called Morris Pepper. He's described as wearing an ill-fitting suit and stares out from beneath a scruffy shock of blonde hair. And he comes on the telly to announce New Albion's decision to withdraw from the control of Great Britain and the Three World Empire and restore the spirit of Pax Britannia. Because, as he says, they're not joiners, they're leaders. If that's not on the nose enough for you, as I said before, it's described as a popular decision that the colony refers to as Three Wexit.
How do you say that in a way that sounds like catchy? Frexit?
It doesn't work on any level.
It works as written, but Ian, how do they say it in the audiobook?
Oh, crikey. Pretty much Three Wexit.
Three Wexit. That doesn't work. It doesn't roll off the tongue. It's awkward.
It's a terrible word, Brexit, anyway.
Yeah.
I hate it. Just call it, I hate made-up words like that.
But you can understand why Brexit had an impact, because these like Linton Crosby style arsehole political communicators and political, movers and shakers who instruct governments on how to get key messages across, they'll love this shit. They'll love it because Brexit is a simple word. It's a simple contraction, and it rolls off the tongue. It looks bold on a newspaper cover. It sticks, and by God, it has stuck. But Three Wexit, no, sorry. And the frustrating thing about all this is there's actually a potentially okay political thriller angle to all of this. So, Chad and Davis share that the situation on the French oil refinery colony on LV-187, for example, could be a setup by New Albion. It could be that they took down the Clara so they could wipe out the colonists and claim salvage rights, planting the Union flag on the refinery. It could be an interesting political thriller. But man, the fucking trappings around it.
See, I was thinking about what you could do to improve the story and still keep like debate, just still keep what's going on in the book. And if all the LV-187 like Alien Egg stuff had happened on planet Brexit, and then you have you have New Albion leaving, and then so you have like Weyland-Yutani and like the Free World Empire coming in to try and catch the alien eggs during all this political upheaval, but so you have all these different factions in play while the aliens are running around during a colony war.
Yeah, well, unlucky. There ain't no colony warring going on.
No.
Is there?
More like a colony disagreement.
Yeah, well, it's the end. It's kind of sets up the potential for colony wars, but I mean, spoiler. I'm reading the one after this, and I don't think anything that happens in this book, for a book series that actually seems to roll threads on through them, I've not come across anything in Inferno's Fall that even vaguely references this book.
I wonder if
don't know
the
if any of the subsequent ones do either.
I wonder if the IP gods turn around to this chap and said, "No," because I do believe that. I know with the case of the RPG, anything they do goes past 20th Century Fox or the people who control the IP.
Yeah. So I read an interview with Alex White, who wrote The Cold Forge and Into Charybdis, and they said that when they sent their manuscripts to 20th Century Fox and subsequently Disney for the second one, Cold Forge came back with no notes, just a letter of commendation, 3-page letter of commendation saying how much they loved it. Into Charybdis came back with 3 notes. They then discussed with the IP right holders, and once they talked it through, they got passed. So they do have to submit this for review, not just to an editor, but also to the IP holders. And all I can think is the IP holders for this didn't know who the fuck Pew Pew, Barley McGrew, Cuthbert Dibble and Grub were.
Oh, God, I think that was my low point of the book. I think that was the point I just gave up side and just left the lounge, scaring my wife briefly because she thought I was genuinely upset about something.
I thought Andy was joking.
No, it's just this book.
No.
She's like, hon, what's wrong? I'm like, no, nothing. It's just this book's really bad.
Every time I want to give it a break, it just takes another ludicrous sub-spitting image turn in turn. And there's one that comes right here, and it is the biggest turn shift in the book, and it's so inappropriate because you've got this section where Chad, Cher, and Davis, the combat AI cockapoo, fool a pair of corporals called Smith and Jones. Smith and Jones, to our American listeners, a pair of comedians.
God, I just got that.
Yeah. They get aboard their ship to break a spaceport lockdown while Cher pretends to be Corporal Poppins and Davis bites a guy on the knackers, right? That is immediately followed up by a scene on LV-187 where a New Albion trader called Priestley, part of the crew of the ship that claims salvage rights, decides he's going to rape the French woman, but after killing her daughter so she doesn't have to watch because he's not a complete monster. This is all within fucking 3 pages of Corporal Smith and Jones and Corporal Poppins and Davis biting a guy in the knackers. You've got rape threat. It's absolutely astonishing. I mean, he gets grabbed by an alien before he can carry it out, but what else do you need in your Brexit analogy and relentless pop culture carnival? Rape and child murder. Yeah, of course. It makes perfect fucking sense. Man, fuck this book. Seriously. But anyway, we read it, so we'll carry on.
Need a medal.
We'll carry on. Yeah, but he'll be back. Priestley will be back, because while he's cocooned and been impregnated, he sings God Save the Queen to an alien queen and becomes the chosen one or something in his own head, but also is allowed to pass alien drones, so apparently does become the chosen one. So is that because he sang God Save the Queen to the alien queen? What? Anyway, the book settles into a fairly standard pattern of alien knockoff once Chad, Shay and Davis arrive and meet up with the surviving crew of the New Albion ship, as well as the French mother and her unusual daughter. So we've got, what have we got? We've got Under Siege, check. Low supplies, check. Survive till a rescue party arrives, check. We'll get the reactor going critical later, even though it's a fusion reactor. So all of the standard stuff, notwithstanding the addition of the alien-sponsored impregnated infiltrator space rapist, which we've not seen before. As it happens, though, hope does arrive in the shape of a Colonial Marines dropship. But unfortunately for our beleaguered gang on LV-187, they're of the Inter-Charybdis variety and are murderous villains who just catch some aliens, then fuck off and leave the survivors behind, but not before killing one of the Brits in cold blood and then arresting Chad for crimes against Weyland-Yutani. Because one of the most interesting things about Inter-Charybdis, again by Alex White, author of The Cold Forge, is that's set on a colony that's Iranian, and the United States Colonial Marines turn up and they're all hideous villains, which is a great, interesting use of the universe, And actually, one of the most interesting things that any of these books has done is making them nefarious villains. But we also get an explanation that the United States Colonial Marine Corps is not actually a branch of the national military, although it might have had its origins in that form. It is now, mostly in fact, a private military contractor doing the bidding whoever pays the highest.
Oh.
And that's mostly Weyland-Yutani. So the USCM are actually corporate troubleshooters and thugs. And that makes me think about the Marines and aliens in a slightly different light, albeit a retconned light. A bunch of barely competent mercenaries trading under the name of US Marines. Their utter uselessness makes more sense. So I actually quite like that. And that is carried on in this novel. So for that alone, I will give him a pass. Not 100% pass, obviously, but a pass for maybe 1 page out of 400. That's pretty good going, I think. That's pretty good going. Now, while all this has been going on, we've also been introduced via Space Boris to Captain Augustus Trent of the Royal Marines. Is anybody called Augustus Trent? I don't know. Maybe they are.
Is anyone called Morris Pepper?
Well, yeah.
I don't know. Augustus Trent does just sound like someone's first
No.
D&D character.
It does a bit. I remember years ago, me and Loz laughing hysterically because our mate Paul, Magic Paul, R.I.P. Magic Paul, bless you, wherever you are in the cosmos. But we all created characters who were essentially mercenaries. We were playing the Twilight 2000 game, but we were playing like the Merc 2000 variety. So the Twilight War hadn't actually happened. But again, clandestine corporate shenanigans and all that business. And we also had a horror angle to it. And in those days, we'd find a picture in a magazine and cut it out. So if you saw an editor in a magazine who had quite a good look in those magazine splash pages, or just a model or whatever, you would cut it out. So Magic Paul, his was ex-captain Gavin Hamilton, and his picture was this sort of slight comb over. A slight comb over, sort of middle-aged guy with sort of looked jowly, and he's still one of my favourite ever player characters that anybody has ever come up with, Gavin Hamilton. But yeah, Augustus Trent, honestly, seriously. But we do get some colony warring at last as Trent's ship arrives in orbit above LV-187 and shoots up the United States Colonial Marine frigate. Oh no, so the dastardly Colonial Marines and their captive aliens and Chad, who they've been drugging up with psychotropics, have no way off the planet. But what follows, once again, okay enough passage of shenanigans involving the death of the Romanian Colonial Marines at the hands of aliens, the Royal Marines arriving just in the nick of time to save our characters, nothing too annoying, and actually, the arrogant Bible-bashing Augustus Trent actually isn't that bad. I actually don't mind that character. I like the idea of him turning up and quoting scripture and being a bit of an head case. It's quite good. I don't mind it. But then, it's all going swimmingly until Chad was introduced to the fire team before they went down. We've already alluded to this. Trent calling them to attention and pointing them out as Pew, McGrew, Cuthbert, Dibble, Grubb. He turned to Chad. Pew and Pew are twins. They'd all saluted, but Chad was sure he'd forget the names and was glad they were stencilled on their ape suits. It didn't matter. Despite Trent's bravado, they wouldn't all be getting out of here alive. Now, anybody of our vintage in the UK knows full well who Pew, McGrew, Cuthbert, Dibble and Grubb are. And they are firemen from Trumpton. Or was it Camberwick Green?
I think it's Trumpton.
Yeah. I always get them mixed up. Chigley, Camberwick Green, Trumpton. I think it was Trumpton, wasn't it? Right, for our American friends, or friends around the world, because of course we've got friends all over the world. Pew, McGrew, Cuthbert, Dibble and Grubb were the names of firemen in a stop-motion animated children's show from the late 1960s. So to read that the Royal Marines have arrived on this planet and they're called those names, well, it might as well be fucking La La, Dipsy and Poe, for all that the serious sense it makes when you're trying to read a book and maintain some level of verisimilitude. Instantly throws me out of the book. And I don't know. I mean, fuck-a-doodle-doo. It gives the impression that the author thinks that this bog-standard alien guff is beneath him. Is it to entertain himself? Is it to entertain the reader? Miles, Ian, does this entertain you?
No, like, this definitely, I think, it's like earlier when the novel refers to Say Nothing of the Dog by Connie Willis, which is a famous SF time travel novel. And then it just feels like it's in here for him to stroke his own ego on the depth of his in-joking.
Ian, does it work for you?
I coped with some of them. It was a bit like I said, I called it minefield. I was like, oh. But this one was just too far.
All it makes me want to do is just quit the book, because if the author can't be asked, then why should I?
Yeah.
And how the narrator of the audiobook, unless they're American... Was the narrator American?
She's British, apparently, but the strange thing is she kind of spoke it in a slightly American accent, but she was British.
Maybe she's too young to remember Trumpton.
I vaguely know of it by some form of osmosis, and I'm knocking on 40.
All I can think is, when Clem Fandango is talking to her in the booth, you know, I'd be saying, shove this script up your ass, Clem Fandango. You know, I'd want to smash the microphone. But you know what? We didn't quit the book. We rode it out like heroes, didn't we? We rode it out like heroes. We get more standard stuff, incursion into alien hive that goes badly. I had to ask Ian what ape suits are.
Yeah.
unfortunately, it was Ian that pointed out to me that ape suits are the guard suits from the end of Alien 3.
Yeah, I'm a terrible aliens nerd, I'm afraid.
Oh,
was
those suits were kind of cool.
I thought they were kind of cool, apart from the fact that you could tell that there were cricket wickets that they were wearing on the shins.
What was I about to say?
Yeah.
I remember I had like an Alien 3 trading card from when the movie came out of those armor suits.
I think it's good look. I think the helmets are great. I think the helmets are really cool. Yeah, cricket pads aside, I think the ape suits are a good look. And, reading up on, because Ian pointed them out to me, reading up on the actual purpose behind them, the purpose of all that padding is to protect against alien blood. So, all right.
Makes sense.
Makes some level of sense, I suppose. So, yeah, we get this incursion to the alien hive that goes badly, the ulterior motive on the behalf of the Royal Marines to secure alien eggs, on the behalf of New Albion, because Morris Pepper wants to use them as a biological weapon. Resulting reactor damage means there's a ticking clock before they're all vaporised, even though it's a fusion reactor. The major revelation, though, is about Therese, the Jola taxi singing 6-year-old, apparently immune to fear and facehuggers. It lands with a splat because it was so obvious. It'll land with a splat to anybody listening to this because we blew it about an hour ago. But it all ends with Chad, Cher, and Marilyn, who's the mother of the synthetic 6-year-old, escaping off-world knowing that the Royal Marines, loyal to New Albion, have sodded off with a load of alien eggs that Space Boris tends to use as a weapon, and there's a host of ships from the various powers in orbit above LV-187, and apparently there is a Royal Marine frigate called Albert Square. And what was the other one, Ian?
Oh, crikey. It was... Let me look at my angry Discord chats.
Yeah, you messaged me earlier in disgust.
No, was it Queen Vic?
London, we got Captain Robert Marlborough of the Queen Charlotte, Peter Wellington of the London Eye, and Karen Trainer of the Albert Square.
Nobody calls their ships that. That's just...
The Albert
Even
Square.
200 years in the future, we'd stick with names like Victorious or Dashers. The Bellerophon names from history.
So, for our non-English listeners, in the USA, this would be like calling the Sulaco sister ship the Falcon Crest.
Yeah.
Or...
The Dallas.
Well,
it's like even the Americans, they were calling this ship the Enterprise.
The USS Central
Enterprise.
Perk.
It kept going.
Yeah.
So it's
it's
a tradition.
just bad.
It's bonkers.
It's just bad, but at least it's over.
Mm.
Thank God it's over. But that book is over. That was Alien Colony War. To be honest, get rid of all the stupid, already dated pop culture references, the excruciatingly sneery allegory. This would be an okay-ish, if by the numbers, Alien IP novel. There are things in it I quite like. I like the idea of the Bible-bashing Royal Marine captain. I think it's...
It has an energy to it, which sometimes the book just really lacks.
Yeah. I don't know. But fun note. Sorry, go on, Ian.
Worst book I've ever read, but it could have been better.
Yeah. It was one of the most irritating books I've ever read. But I still read it. I think more out of just like, really, is this happening?
Sorry, I listened to it. It was even slower.
Yeah.
I just got to read it through contractual obligation.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Yeah. I've already apologised 4 times.
You got a week to do your homework.
Yeah. No more apologies. We made it. We made it through.
Well, I've always wanted to get on a podcast, and if I've got to do this, then I took a bullet for the team.
Yeah, you did, mate.
Look, you didn't have to read a gore novel, so you're fine.
I lied, as we say, I laid back and thought of England.
Fun note, though, these novels by this point had started including tie-in scenarios for the Free League Alien role-playing game, which is quite interesting, isn't it? So you've got yours there. So Colony War's got one. Inferno's Fall has got one.
Yes,
the Cold Forge has
played it, haven't we? Not the game, not this particular game.
Yeah, you ran it for us, didn't you? Yeah.
That's right. That was really good.
You ran it.
I did?
Yeah.
You were an android.
I was, yeah. And that's a really interesting point to raise, actually. So you can play a synthetic in the Alien role-playing game. And what an interesting sociological experiment playing a synthetic in a role-playing game is. Because all the other players treated me like shit.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Wow.
Yeah. It was really an odd experience. And I've had a similar thing before where, and he's an old mate of mine, but I decided to play a female character, and it completely changed the way his character reacted to mine in terms of role playing, and I was really shocked. I was clutching my pearls. I really was. It was incredible. It was you wouldn't think that just tabletop role playing game would give you such an interesting, sociological experience. But yeah, I actually finished that Alien game feeling quite.
Yeah, I remember.
I was
kind
quite
of step in
put
and
out
say,
by the entire experience.
Didn't I kind of step in and say, look, he's a very useful and expensive machine. Don't treat him like a piece of rubbish. I kind of I was the referee, and I kind of said, look, you can't treat him like that just because he's a machine. He's different.
Yeah,
he's actually very useful. Hint, hint.
Yeah, that's why when I did that game, The Hum, which I shared the outline of and part of the write up with you, Ian, I had the synthetic as essentially unidentified as a synthetic. They were a secret synthetic. And it was I only did that purely based upon that experience, but it actually did make it more intriguing. Interestingly, though, the role playing game scenario in Colony War really doesn't have any mention of anything to do with the New Albion nonsense. It's all set on LV-187 and really just concentrates purely on that aspect. So whoever did the scenario for that, I think stayed wisely well away from all that stuff. Yeah. So
there was one thing about the book that, am I misreading this? There is no mention of Hadley's Hope, LB-426, or even, is the Nostromo not even mentioned?
No, but they're generally not mentioned that much at all in many of the novels. I
wonder if they've been told to steer clear of that. Like George Lucas said, don't talk about Yoda to the original.
Well, maybe, but the Cold Forge, which we'll touch upon shortly, that does refer briefly early on to Burke's attempt to secure alien eggs or biomatter or whatever being unsuccessful. Therefore, the experiments on the Cold Forge are like their backup plan.
But actually,
so there are references to it.
Also, Hadley's Hope wouldn't have happened yet because this would take place in the gap between Alien and Aliens.
That was the bit I was trying to rectify in my head.
What this does?
Yeah, because isn't this when Amanda Ripley's...
No, this is for post-Aliens, but they explain Amanda Ripley being alive because of cryosleep.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
Because, of course, when you go into
cryo... wasn't it?
When you go into cryosleep, the rest of the universe carries on as normal.
Yeah.
And you could be in cryosleep for a year.
Okay, all right. So
or even longer.
I missed that part.
Yeah, so these are all set post Hadley's Hope.
Gotcha.
Yeah. In theory, Ellen Ripley could meet Amanda Ripley and she wouldn't have aged. But then she died.
Well, only if Alien 3 didn't happen. Yeah.
That's messed up my mind now.
Anyway.
Or Alien Resurrection.
Yeah.
She could meet a clone.
Alien Resurrection, how many years is that set after Alien 3?
2?
It's like
150.
Yeah, it's a long time, isn't it? It's not just a few years.
And that involves France.
Oh, yeah, French actors.
They land outside of Paris.
We do.
A couple of the characters are... He's the chap in the wheelchair, he's French.
Yeah, Dominic Pignon is French, isn't he? He's the only French actor in it, though. French director Dominic Pignon is in it. And yes, they do land near the ruined Eiffel Tower in the original ending, which was removed for the theatrical cut. Yeah. So anyway, after we've read a tie-in that was extraordinarily frustrating, but tie-ins that get it right. So I think some of the Dark Horse comics are pretty good. I think a lot of them are forgettable. Some of them I quite like, but there's a recent 3-part series produced under the new agreement. Now it's all owned by Disney, which is really good. The Alien Isolation game, novelization not, but the Alien Isolation game I think was really good. I love the setting of the Sevastopol station and all that business. I think it's absolutely fantastic. But the other one that we were going to talk about was the Cold Forge. And we won't go into as much detail because we've been here forever as it is and you guys have got lives.
I'm not ready yet.
Yeah. Well, we're going to touch on it and we won't spoil it for you, Ian, but we will touch on some of the things that make it really good.
Don't worry about it.
Yeah. No, we're not going to spoil it because I think you should read it. And actually, I think Alex White's novels, The Cold Forge and Into Charybdis, are both just great sci-fi novels.
Yeah.
as well as being good Alien Universe novels. Why are their novels more interested and less fixated on the usual tropes and trappings? So, Miles, for you, without kind of spoiling it for Ian, what does the Cold Forge do right, and why is it a superior example of this kind of spin-off fiction?
Well, for one thing, we have no teams of gun-toting, cigar-chomping. We have one character who's a former Marine, and the rest of it is just it takes place on a corporate research station, and I think it's just a lot more of the corporate skullduggery. Awkward office politics was a fun part. It's taking.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Yeah.
It's taking like the tropes and trappings, but it's just like, hey, let's do something a little bit different. Let's work on this aspect. Let's play up the corporate work angle instead of just. There's no need to do the corporate intrigue because everyone on the station is in on what they're trying to do on the station.
Only Marcus the android is kind of technically an innocent. Everybody else, even if they're sort of set up as a protagonist, are engaged in really reprehensible experiments. Even Blue Marsalis, yeah.
Even Blue, who is, I would say, the heroine of the book, is monstrous at times. Just like there's a lot of just the two. So definitely say the book comes down to Blue and Dorian Sudler, and who are your two dichotomies, and they are both just really fascinating and monstrous characters in their own way.
It's brilliant, isn't it? Because you understand the motivations.
Yeah.
And they're really well drawn because they're essentially your two key point of view characters. So, Ian, what you've got is you've got a lot of the staples of these things. So you've got a Weyland-Yutani scientific base, you've got scientists, you've got aliens, you've got experiments, you've got a synthetic, you've got one, possibly two ex-Colonial Marines. There's a couple of things that are unusual. One is the novel is unusual for this series, written in the present tense. So it gives that strange sense of immediacy. It doesn't feel like it's being narrated by someone who survived and who is telling the story later. It adds to that sense of you don't know what's coming next. It's got really two key point of view characters who Miles has just mentioned. You've got Dorian Sudler. So Sudler is a Weyland-Yutani auditor whose entire life consists of auditing scientific outposts and rationalising expenditure, i.e. sacking people and shutting down projects so he can get a better bonus by saving the company money, before returning to hypersleep and travelling to his next assignment on his small ship with a crew of 3. He's a vain, cold psychopath who waxes his skin, works out obsessively, and uses sex as a psychological tool. He's basically Patrick Bateman in space. It's fantastic. And actually, funny enough, American Psycho is written in the present tense as well, so I do wonder if that was why. But his next assignment is the Cold Forge, which is a scientific outpost orbiting a hostile, highly radioactive dwarf star. And our second POV character is Blue Marsalis, who's a scientist working on a project studying the biology of the xenomorph. She's a bedbound, queer woman of colour with a terminal disease who uses a VR headset to essentially take over and pilot a synthetic called Marcus so she can work with, interact with, and in one case shag her colleagues. And she's got a secret project within the project. But most importantly, she's not a victim. She's bedbound, she's terminally ill. There's a brilliant scene where she observes herself through the eyes of Marcus the synthetic and looks down at herself, laid there with bed sores, drooling, which is such a wild idea and concept. But she's an active protagonist. Despite all this, she's not a victim, she's an active protagonist. And much like Sudler, she's an antagonist in her own right. And these two are on a collision course when everything goes horribly wrong and a bunch of chimpanzee-derived xenomorph experiments get thrown in to complicate things. It's fucking fantastic. And on the subject of the xenomorph term, it's amusingly dismissed by Blue as a simple generic term that makes no sense in the wider context of things. So they call the aliens Snatchers. And at one point, Dorian Sudler says, yeah, that's not a very good name, is it? I wouldn't have called them that. But it's like, well, this is what we've chosen. So you've got this great setup with characters pretty unique in relation to this franchise. Something else it's got going for it, there are genuinely horrific scenes that are upsetting in a way none of the other books I've read in this series have been able to match. And the worst one doesn't actually include aliens or snatchers. There's an interlude. There's a technician called Dick the Australian, who's like the chimpanzee handler. And he goes down to the chimp enclosure and finds a scientist operating on one without anaesthetic in full sight of all the other chimps. And they're all going absolutely crazy. It's really fucking upsetting. It's a really upsetting scene. And it's brilliantly written. And it's head and shoulders above most of the others that I've read. There's a couple of others that have been okay, but this is just great.
The one thing I really liked about Sutler, which they don't hit you over the head with it, just by the way his character is described and just the intensity of his workout, he essentially looks like an alien like an alien xenomorph in human form. To the point that when he sees the Snatcher for the first time, the Snatcher reacts violently to him in a way the technicians say, "Oh, they've never done that before." Yeah.
And he also identifies really closely with the android, doesn't he? He looks at Marcus and is jealous because he aspires to be more like a synthetic. It's terrific stuff. It's really good. And they're complex led characters, and Blue's a complex led character despite her actions being pretty mean, particularly if you're a chimp. And Dorian Sudler is just a fucking great villain. And once his true nature is really revealed, he is just fantastic. And like I said, I'd even go as far as saying this is just a great sci-fi thriller. And a lot of people who dismiss IP tie-in fiction are missing out on a cracking sci-fi yarn here. I would really strongly recommend The Cold Forge to anybody. Yeah. I've wondered how much the authors of these works are kind of stymied by, originally 20th Century Fox and later Disney in terms of what they can do. But as I said earlier, I came across an interview with Alex White on a channel on YouTube called Alien Theory. And that's when they said they were surprised when their submission of The Cold Forge came back with no notes and that lengthy letter of commendation. And then Inscriptus came back with 3 minor points that they talked through with the IP owners, and then they were just waived, and they were essentially published as written. So it does seem like a lot of the authors just want to write the same devoted Colonial Marine, Weyland-Yutani, screaming, mindless alien bug horde fiction. And of course, a lot of the readership wants that, and good luck to them, but it's not for me, really. But The Cold Forge was actually a big hit right across the board, which it just goes to show, the fucking douchebags who criticise Inferno's Fall for putting woke politics into it. They were all queuing up to, criticise this for having the key protagonist being black, queer, bedbound, essentially disabled. I don't know, maybe because they all got a hard-on for Dorian Sudler. I don't know. It's hard to tell.
God, I hope not.
Yeah, but obviously a lot of the readership, they want that kind of a older style. But The Cold Forge was a big hit across the board. So, swing for the fences, take some risks. And that's what Alex White did. And and they got the positive feedback and delivered another good Alien book.
You can... The thing is, tropes aren't inherently bad. It's just what you choose to do with them. And this takes all the aliens' trappings and then goes, okay, what if we go right instead of left and just develop this stuff, or just kind of, because I'd say also this becomes more a disaster movie. What is the one with the boat that turns upside down?
Poseidon Adventure.
There we go, the Poseidon Adventure. After Poseidon Adventure were also a horror film.
Yeah, and had chimpanzee xenomorphs in it. Yeah.
A slasher.
Oh, it's good stuff. Fun fact as well, Alex also wrote a Deep Space Nine novel.
That's actually a pretty fun one.
Oh, have you read it?
Yeah, I listened to the audiobook. It's Dax focused, so it is a very much, if you like Dax and Trills and the idea of being able to tap into past lives, then I would recommend it.
Yeah, I might check it out at some point.
I do want to check out Into Charybdis, because I did enjoy this one. And I'm really glad I got to reread this one after reading Colony War.
Yeah, Into Charybdis is great. It's also a nice coincidence that Alex wrote that DS9 novel because, of course, Robert Sheckley wrote a Deep Space Nine novel. as well. And you may find that turning up in your letterbox. So, yeah, watch out for it. But anyway, the idea of this is that we build towards reading The Coming of the Terraphiles by Michael Moorcock, which is Moorcock's entry into original novels for wider IP fiction. So we'll get to it at some point. We'll get to it. But yeah, I think there are other things to explore. One of the things I want to read is the E.C. Tubb original Space 1999 novel, which I think was the last Space 1999 novel ever published until Jerry Anderson or Network or wherever it was published a collection. But it's the last one that original and was ever published. So yeah, I've got that kicking around somewhere. I think it's called Space Seed or something like that. I'll have to dig that out at some point. Quite hard to get hold of though. But anyway, that was Colony War and a discussion on the pitfalls and the ups and downs of writing IP fiction for Alien. So, chaps, I've kept you here for 2 long hours talking about Pew, Pew, McGrew, Cuthbert, Dibble, Grub, and God knows what else. So I'll just say thank you. God.
Too late.
Oh, Ian, we forgot about that, didn't we? Pulse rifle beams. Oh, let's get down into some ridiculous nerd nitpicking. So at one point, it refers to a pulse rifle beam. We have a pulse pistol blast.
That's right.
Yeah, there's some dodgy stuff.
It gets a
going
bit
on
confusing.
No, because I remember that being like one of the bits of Aliens that people found groundbreaking was that they weren't just using laser guns in space.
Mm.
No, they were using caseless ammunition, which at the time was like a sci-fi concept.
Right.
Because the Heckler and Koch G11 was like a prototype of a weapon that fired caseless ammunition. And everybody thought it would be Germany's national military weapon, but it never happened for whatever reason, because they could never iron out particular issues with it.
Isn't there a quote in another one of the books? I think it's a Book War. It says, all these grunts are really shocked to find that when they sign up, the pulse rifles don't fire laser blasts. I'm sure it's Book War. I was reading it the other day for this. I was like, that makes sense. Because I remember reading the novelization, think, pulse rifles. Oh, right, okay. Then when I saw the film, I went, okay, it makes sense.
Of course, one of the amusing things about watching the film is the talk about pulse rifles firing caseless ammunition.
Standard light armor Felix, 10mm.
Yeah, but you can see the brass cartridges flying out of them when they're actually firing them, because they're basically Thompson submachine guns with loads of plastic slapped on them. Yeah. But anyway, that's nerdy nitpicking, isn't it? That's nerdy nitpicking. But thank you both. Thank you both for dropping by Derry and Tom's once again to talk about this guff. And we'll see you next time.
Best of British to you.
Top of the morning tweet. Oh, no,
it's Prosecco o'clock. Yeah. Massive thanks to Miles and Ian for dropping by the Derry and Tom's lounge on Sevastopol Station to smoke some weird yellow tabs and talk about spaceships and monsters and colossally irritating pop culture references. You can find the Casual Trek podcast on all good podcatchers, and I'll link to Ian's art and Patreon pages in the show notes. Be sure to check them out. Ian also keeps teasing a podcast of his own talking about all things sci-fi and techie, so get cracking, Ian. I want to talk about Homeworld, damn it. For more on my own past history of preparing space truckers and thinly drawn space convicts to incompetent Colonial Marines, I think my In Defense of Alien 3 feature from 2012 might still be up on thequietus.com, although the rather contentious 100-odd post-long flame war thread that ensued in the comments is long since deleted, sadly. It didn't have my input, I might add. I'm happy to like the touch paper, but no way can I be asked to live with my choices. There are far too many other things to talk about. I'll link to that article in the show notes anyway, because why not? While you're on there, you can read my defence of David Lynch's Dune, which was subtweeted years later by Cal MacLachlan himself, the original Muad'Dib, or should I say, Muad'Dib. And also Neil Marshall's Doomsday too, amongst other ramblings. As it happens, we were at the Sci-Fi Weekender in Great Yarmouth a couple of weeks ago, and Phil met Neil Marshall there. I was too hungover, so didn't bother going along, and I stayed in the trailer, but she met Peter Davison too, and she said he was absolutely lovely. So that's nice, isn't it? When I was looking back at those articles on the Quietus, I found that I'd even written one about Moorcock's very own screen adaptation of The Land That Time Forgot to coincide with a DVD release, something I have zero memory of doing. It was only about 12 years ago. But that's aging. In other news, we've had some cool comments on YouTube this last week or so. On our Options and Robert Sheckley show, Jeremy Greenwood 1021 said, Thanks again for a highly entertaining reading of a novel I might find irritating. I like things with a beginning, a middle, and an end, preferably in that order, but for some reason I adore Jerry Cornelius. I suppose that once I know a book is by Moorcock, I open my mind. Though when you review a book, I invariably find I've missed much of the point of it. I won't elaborate, too embarrassing. For some reason, the name Robert Sheckley is very familiar to me. I've no idea why. I like all your diversions and reminiscences. I've bought Rebel at the End of Time on Kindle. Thanks for that. I will make comments, no matter how naive, because Konstantin, inside Russia, tells me that they are very helpful to people posting on YouTube. Well, once again, Jeremy, you're not wrong. We love getting comments. And thanks too to Glenn Sawyer for a couple of more welcome comments also on YouTube. First, on our last episode looking at the Weird of the White Wolf. Oh, this is very timely and much appreciated. I'd owned the Granada editions of what I thought were the complete Elric books in the early 80s, and when I'd first found Moorcock and the Stormbringer RPG, and of course the Melnibonéan mythos in the first edition AD&D Deities and Demigods book, and just hearing about the Clackar and the Mist Giant, etc., transported me back to a gentler and less stressful time. I know now I didn't have the full Elric roster by any means, and I still don't now, but I did dig them out for a shelfie and discovered to my horror I must have lent out the Granada Elric of Melniboné. Cue a panicked impulse buy on eBay last week. Moongloom remains my favourite eternal companion, along with Jari, and painted Citadel minis of the pair of them have been shoved into D&D and RuneQuest and other games intentionally over the years, in different campaigns and with different players. Some new, some found out. When I discovered your podcast on YouTube last year, it prompted me to reread Coram. Now, once I've finished a brilliant book about how Judge Dredd accidentally prophesied more of a way of the modern world than I'm comfy with, it'll be a jaunt back into the Young Kingdoms. Thank you so much for the ongoing inspiration, memories, and humour. Thanks for reminding me, Glenn, about that Dredd book. I picked a copy up when it was published, and I've completely forgotten about it, so I still haven't read it. And second, on our Time of the Hawklaws show, Glenn said, "Finally had a long drive today to listen to this in the car on the way back from picking up the eldest from Leeds Uni for Easter. Love this. I never knew about these books and they sound awesome. The idea of the band as heroes in a post-apocalyptic realm is such a good idea of inspiration for RPGs. I've scuttled off to look at Rock Opera 79, the Lucid Eye Minis Comeback Tour range, and, for fellow online music and strangeness, The Night Begins to Shine by BER from the cartoon series Teen Titans Go! Smiley face. Thanks so much for them comments, Glenn. I've similarly been thinking about inserting some of that more specific rock band in a mystery machine in ghost-haunted seaside towns in fucked Britain to my list of to-do games. In fact, it makes a nice expansion to my other seaside game that I've been gestating, Ramsay by the Sea. You're all effectively orphaned. Your parents may not be physically dead, but they are lost, soulless, spending their days in the Findus factory, or the laundrette, or the council office, or hoovering the home and scrubbing skating boards with a toothbrush, or half comatose on the sofa watching Mr. and Mrs., or earnestly attending job clubs to regain what they perceive, through their contaminated lens, to be normalcy and respect. So you fled, or were thrown out, to the relative safety of a council flat, or a squat, or a tumble-down caravan. Your main hangout as a group is one of the above. It's damp, nicotine-stained. The 2-bar electric fire only works some of the time, but it's your space. Your only concession to the man is signing on. Your fortnight's a roller coaster ride that pivots on gyro day. Your holdout's against the tide that insists you submit to the fugue. Some of you have faded already. Smiggy, Jono, Boff, Shandy, all succumbed and swallowed up by the routine, all becoming one with the pressure. You saw Shandy just last week. Something's gone from behind her eyes, replaced by something else. She tried to evangelise with the epiphany, the moment of clarity that led her to apply for a job in John Menzies. She looked and sounded intense. You fear you'll be caught by it. The intensity. You must avoid Job Finder on teletext. You mustn't take your job coach seriously. You must not succumb to the despair. And thanks as always to our patrons for keeping the show on the road. First, those without tier. Anthony Piconti, Tim Cardos, Dave Dempster, and Sebastian Weetabix. And our Chaos Engineers Andrew Cicluna, Andrew Spong, Andrew Van Ness, Anthony Porter, Benjamin Fletcher, Brandon Mays, Dan Charnley, Dave Griffiths, Dave Voxman, Gabriel Laycock, Harvey Faulkner Aston, Jim Kirkland, Jim Jupp, John W. Lays, Jules Lawrence, Mal Pertwee, Mary Catherine, Matt Saltz, Nelbert, Ophir Ziv, Paul McRandall, PJ Cooper, Scott Butler, and Simon Perrins. And our crafty jugaderos Alexander Harris, Christian Hundal, Eliam Westonra, Liam Turner, Loz, Mark Taylor, Matthew Broom, Graham Holden, Toby White, and Thanasis Beltios. Thanks, Thanasis, for your tips. I really appreciate it. An eternal thanks to our patron demons, Alistair Davison, Andy Clark, Andy Darby. Andy's book is out. I'll link to that in the show notes too. David Lee, Fred Quiche, Gareth Wilson, Glenn Sawyer, Greg Faulkner, Gwen Barlow, Ian Stead, Imria, Jenny Stim, Jason Vogel, Jay Reeser, Joe Monty, Lee Gary, Mark Hebden, Marius Latauskas, Miles Reid-Lobatto, Neil Burton, Paul Hillary, Randall Gatlin, Steve Round, Tom Murphy, Tony Milazzo, the OG patron Norma Beresford, and last but never least, Robert McMillan. Right, before I go, I have pristine copies of Colony War and Inferno Fall. Is it Inferno Falls? Inferno's Fall. Inferno's Fall, which I'm going to give away to a lucky patron. So, I say lucky, possibly unlucky, but Janie Stim, they'll be headed your way. Enough from me now. Don't forget you can follow us on Twitter and Instagram with the handle @BreakfastRuins. You can email us at breakfastruins@outlook.com. The webpage is breakfastintheruins.com. We have our Patreon page too, and there are a few extra odds and sods on there. But for now, take care, stay safe, and we will meet again soon on the Moonbeam Roads.